Good morning, my friends. It is Thanksgiving Day 2019. And I'm going to talk, as always, on these, or usually on these, about climate change. And I'm going to talk about specifically, no, you stay right here, baby. You don't have to go. We talk specifically about um, amelioration and adaptation. There are two competing views of what we should do about climate change now. One is that we should ameliorate it, we should take action to keep it from getting worse. And the other is that we should go straight to adaptation on the theory that it's already too late and that all that's left is for us to adapt to it. Hang on just a second. I fumbled my face size there. I would propose that the two actions, if taken seriously, would be the same action, and that to ameliorate climate change and to adapt to the irrefutable reality of where we are today would take the same actions. And those actions are to begin now a society-wide move away from high speed and high energy solutions and toward walking pace solutions. The question becomes, how does one implement a society-wide change like that? Does the government come in and point guns at everybody's head and say, we're taking your car away from you? Or, how does one implement it? And the answer to that is that each individual person, each individual family, each individual little group of humans, little group, family-sized group, has to act individually on their own. There's my chica, Chima baby. To do it, because really all that society is globally is 7.5 billion individual people, and there have been enough experiments run already by people like the Red Chinese and the Khmer Rouge and Hitler and all these other people to establish that kind of change can't be forced. And if we look in our own history, if we look 100 years ago, right now in 1919, there were almost no cars in the United States, just a handful. And the change from there to where we are now, that was done completely independently by all the individuals who sold their horses and bought cars. That's how we got here. I know it seems crazy, but that's actually how we got here. Yes, there was advertising. Yes, there was government things which made cars easy. We built nationwide roads. We did all these things. But the driving force for the change was individual demand for a new solution. We had this solution that we'd had for 6,000 years, and we were tired of it, and we thought we should go faster. We thought we needed to go faster because we couldn't be human at these low speeds. And so we bought cars. Fast is fun. That's the basic reason everybody bought cars, is because fast is exciting. That's why young people don't want to get out on a horse and have it walk through the woods. They want to get out on a horse and have it run through the woods. Fast is exciting. And that's why we got cars. That's how we got here. Fast is exciting. Nobody was starving to death because they couldn't get to the store. Well, we know that. There's never been a human culture where the individual humans couldn't get access to the resources they needed at the speeds they could move. Or at least if there has, that human culture's gene pool is not represented in today's 7.5 billion, because all the people who are here are descended from people who could get the resources they needed to stay alive. It's a obvious fact. So the speed did not give us the ability to get resources because we were already getting the resources. We added the speed, we could still get the resources, and we could go farther to get the resources, but our personal need for resources didn't increase. Our personal want for resources did. It's easier to whip up wants than needs. But the whole deal was done by individuals, and that's how it has to be done again, is by individuals. And the reason I'm talking to you is because I'm trying to talk you into being one of the individuals who does this. You know, to say people won't do that, that's not relevant. You know, you're not people, you're you. And I'm asking you personally to do this. I'm asking you personally to consider this. And ignore all the other people, because we're talking about adaptation here. We're talking about surviving past the breakdown. And we know, I believe it's certain. We don't know this because we know nothing about the future. It's not knowable. I believe it's certain that when the collapse comes, no matter which leg that holds up this rickety machine that is modern society falls out, it doesn't really matter which leg falls out. The whole thing falls down. So once we can no longer get gasoline, once we can no longer get, jet planes to fly, then we have to do what's left. And what's left will be move at the speed that we can walk, or move with animals that we can persuade to do the walking for us, or some combination of the two. So if that's correct, and my assumption in life is that that's correct, I can't prove it. If that's correct, then to adapt to climate change, to pre-adapt to the breakdown, is to arrange a life in which you can reach the resources you absolutely must have. You absolutely must have water. You absolutely must have food. You absolutely must have shelter. You really need some way to warm your shelter. You really need some way to cook your food. You really need a way to dress your body. We've been naked apes for so long, we don't know. We've moved beyond naked. We can't go back there. We can't do that. Okay, so those things you need. I mean, you got to have food, water, shelter, air to breathe, a way to keep your body temperature in a range where you don't die of it. Not too hot and not too cool. And then beyond that, if society just fell on its face and nothing's running, then you don't need anything else. You don't need a computer. You don't need, we're talking getting through the worst of it. Because on the far side, humans, if there are still any, will build back up a working society. We had a working society before we got cars and airplanes. We can know how to do that. So the question is, how do you get through the low period? And the way you get through the low period is you arrange your life so that you can get all the resources you need without driving a car or flying an airplane or turning on any electricity. Those are the big three. Okay? If you can get the resources you need without doing those things, then when the fuel and the electricity fail, you don't automatically die. Now, you could still be killed by other humans. Humans are not going to be happy after all this stuff breaks, and there's going to be a lot of hysteria. But we can't really provide for that. Not in my sense of providing for it. So the first thing you do is if you live in a city, you try to move someplace where there's stores within walking distance. Maybe you club up with 3 or 4 neighbors in your same walking height building, and you start ordering stuff in bulk and selling it to each other I don't know how you do it, but your objective is to be able to provide your minimum requirements without driving. Now, if you still have to drive your car to get to work, that's okay. Work's not a minimum requirement of survival. Work's a requirement of living in our current system. So if this current system breaks down and you can't get to work anymore, that's okay. Work won't be there anyway. So the deal is to get to where you can get your minimum requirements, not produce them all yourselves. We're too far into being social creatures to produce all our minimum requirements. You know, you can go back thousands of years and people were already baking bread for other people. You know, people were already raising grain for other people. People were already sewing garments for other people. You know, we are not evolved to provide for all our own needs, and I don't believe it's possible. But we are evolved to attain all our needs at a walking pace. So, since I live in the country and since I produce some of my needs out of this land, I've chosen my walking pace power source to be a donkey. And there's a lot of good in using a donkey as your walking pace power source. For one thing, they're great company. But if you live in an urban environment, you know, people in urban environments throughout all of human history have attained all their needs by walking. They don't have beasts of burden. Some do. There have always been beasts of burden in cities. This thing that I hear from people, well, you know, you can't have a donkey in a city. Sure you can. I mean, people around you made rules that said you couldn't. So you may not, but you can. You know, we have a whole huge industry that wastes untold fossil fuel and emits untold carbon into the atmosphere for the express purpose of removing and wasting donkey food from urban dwellings. That it's called the lawn care industry. Okay, we really know that we can do this. It's just a matter of loving to cling to the thing we have. So you could. It's just that people won't let you. And if people get hungry, they may get too busy to focus on enforcing those laws. It's hard to say. But anyway, it doesn't matter. If you live in a city, you need to arrange a life wherein you can get all your needs in that environment. And if you live in the country, you need to do the same. Now, those are things that you would do to adapt for society after the tipping point, the climate change tipping point comes. But what if you wanted to prevent climate change? These same actions, to the extent you can maximize them in your life, these actions do not emit carbon. If all the individual people quit driving, then all the carbon that comes from our cars would stop coming out. If all the individual people quit driving, all the deadly powders that are emitted from our tires and our brakes would stop being emitted. This really is an individual choice. It doesn't look like one because you go out on the interstate and there's you and 12,000 other cars. But those are 12,000 individual people. And if every one of those 12,000 individual people was sitting in his car thinking, how can I get out of this? Some of them would think of ways to do it. And the more that thought of ways to do it, the more foundation they would create, which would simplify the process for other people to do it. So in fact, if we're serious about ameliorating climate change, which right now, I'm sorry, but we're not. Okay, we're just not. I don't want to hear it. You can look around you. Nobody's serious about ameliorating climate change. When everybody in the world says somebody else needs to change to make climate change better, that's a fact. That's a immediate proof that nobody's concerned enough about climate change to change their own lives. I'm doing fine. I'm happy here. I like my car. I like my planes. I like to fly to Disney World every summer, every winter. So everybody else has to change. They have to invent new things that have never been invented that will let me fly to Disney World and not emit carbon. That's not a society that's actually concerned about climate change. That's a society that's concerned about assigning blame. A society that was concerned about solving climate change, each individual would look for a way to do it, because there's nobody here. There's nobody in the United States but 330 billion individuals. And most of them are adults. And most of them individually take actions every day that burn fossil fuels and emit carbon. I do. But each individual has the power to emit less carbon. Each individual has the power, no, that's not true. Many individuals have the power to create environments which will consume more carbon, because plants consume carbon. It's a known fact that in the billions of years the Earth has been here, the only thing that has ever taken carbon out of the atmosphere is photosynthesis. We know that. And so if every person who had a place to plant a tree would plant a tree, that would help. If every person who had a place to plant a tree would plant a tree that would produce human food, like a chestnut, that would help more. If every person who could get one thing a week by walking instead of driving would walk to get that one thing, that would help. Because those are the things that would create the economy of a smaller scale. We have this phrase that we use, economies of scale. Economies of scale are actually profit sources of scale. The big creates an environment in which the profit-taking individual in the transaction can attain more profit. But the globe is dying over it, because the scale that serves the profit function does not serve the ecological function. So what we need to do is create small, freestanding little economic units. If 20 people in a town, in a city, all got together and agreed, we will support one of our number to order in bulk, get it shipped in, and distribute it to us. Or order in bulk and go get it with her car, and then come back and distribute it to us. If you had one person going to the big store to shop for 20 people, you would have a 19-fold reduction in carbon emissions for those 20 people to eat. As long as we wait for someone else to fix this, it's never going to get well. So I'm asking you personally, not other people. I don't care what other people do. I'm asking you personally to find a way to make your life smaller scale and lower speed and less energy wasting. And if you do that before the collapse, you have helped to reduce the likelihood of the collapse. And if enough people do that before the collapse, we might be able to prevent it, although it's not looking good. But if you do that before the collapse, when the collapse comes, you will be better prepared to go on, possibly even to help those who didn't have the wisdom that you had and didn't do that. So adaptation and amelioration, if you want to take a realistic view of them, are the same thing. And the fiction of high-speed amelioration is simply a fiction, and you just ignore it. You don't worry about it. You let the people who want to talk about it go ahead and talk about it. But it's never going to happen. It is provably never going to happen. It is provably not possible. There's nobody out there with a supercomputer who's doing climate research who can turn that same supercomputer around and, as their inputs, use the energy required to produce renewables, the energy required to place renewables, the energy required to connect renewables, the energy required to mine and obtain resources in the renewables, and show that the renewables plan reaches a meaningful reduction in emissions within any of the time frames anybody's given you. It's not possible. It's hopeless. It's not hopeless. It's actually offensive. Because if instead of just climate science, we pull together all the natural sciences, including climate science, not to exclude it. Climate science is very important. But if we use that and all the other natural sciences and we pull them all together, all of them together show us clearly and plainly that the natural systems of planet Earth are the only thing that has any conceivable power to restore the carbon balance, to restore the water availability, to restore any of what we need. I mean, it's easy to see that all the necessary tools are already there. Nothing has to be invented. Nothing has to be created. What we have to do is we have to admit that this system doesn't work, and that as humans we have the ability to develop a different one that will work. And it will work both for amelioration and for adaptation. So whatever you want to accomplish, you can accomplish that by slowing down. And I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. I hope that your family loves you. I hope that you have friends. I hope that you're not alone. And I hope that people are kind to you and you're kind to them in return. Because that's the best of what we have. And I thank you.